"I want a divorce," said my wife, Amy. I was speechless at her words. Amy said this without giving me any prior context. "My name is John, and I am 28 years old. It's just the two of us, living together. I work at an advertising agency. I've been so busy with work that I haven't had much time for Amy." Was that the reason? Amy suddenly brought up divorce. No matter what I asked, Amy adamantly demanded a divorce, and eventually, I had to give in. I was somewhat forced to sign the divorce papers, and in the end, we got divorced. But I still couldn't quite forget about Amy. And it's no wonder, as back in college, Amy was the most beautiful girl on campus. She was incredibly pretty and kind to everyone. Her sleek, clean-cut bob, along with her visible dimples when she smiled. I never had the courage to speak to Amy, who was always surrounded by other guys. But by chance, we ended up in the same seminar and started talking a lot. Both Amy and I loved animals, and coincidentally, our thesis topics were related to marine and terrestrial creatures. We began frequently visiting zoos and aquariums on weekends for our research. We both successfully completed our theses, helping each other along the way. When we graduated from college, I mustered all my courage and confessed my feelings to Amy. I just wanted to let her know how I feel, but to my surprise, Amy's response was, "I like you too." I thought it was a dream. Me, who had successfully made Amy admired by everyone, my girlfriend. I vowed to become a man worthy of her. I worked hard on my appearance and started working out. In my job, I spared no effort and became the best performer among my peers. I felt that I could do my best at anything if it were for Amy's sake. Our relationship progressed smoothly. Amy was thriving as an interior coordinator. We found time for dates, despite our busy schedules. After about 2 years of this, I started thinking about marriage. We were at Amy's favorite aquarium on a date. I approached her as she was looking at the fish through the glass. "Can I talk to you for a moment? I have something important to say." When I called Amy, she turned towards me. It was just Amy and me, surrounded by colorful fish swimming around comfortably. I took a small box out of my pocket and said, "Amy, will you marry me? I promise to make you happy no matter what." I opened the small box in front of Amy. She gasped in surprise at the sparkling diamond engagement ring. With tears in her eyes, Amy replied, "I would be honored. Please, take good care of me." And so, I quickly ended up marrying Amy. We were on top of our game in both work and love, fearing nothing. But the happy days didn't last long. I became extremely busy after getting married and hardly had time for Amy. Still, I thought we were getting along well. I never missed giving flowers on anniversaries and hurried home to her on days that I could leave work early. Being with Amy made my life worthwhile. And yet, suddenly, I was hit with this demand for divorce. Right after the divorce from Amy, embarrassingly, I drowned myself in alcohol and gambling. No matter how much I drank, the lingering memories of Amy in this room were too painful. So, I threw myself into work even more to forget her. Fortunately, I had a big project at hand at the time. I was practically living at the office. It was a few months after the divorce when I finally completed the project. I had immersed myself in work to forget Amy. But to those around me, I appeared passionate about my job. The project was a huge success, and I earned a promotion. For succeeding in my job, the company also gave me a long vacation. But being at home, I couldn't help but think about Amy. Unable to bear being in my room, I decided to go out, with no real purpose. As I was wandering in front of a shopping center, I saw Amy walking towards me, looking happy. There was a solid-looking guy with her. I was so shocked that I stood there, frozen. Then, as if she felt my gaze, our eyes met, Amy's and mine. She also looked at me awkwardly. I let out a dry laugh involuntarily. Somehow, I had suspected something like this. there's usually one reason a man gets blindsided with a divorce. I had a hunch that Amy might have found someone new. I even asked her during our divorce. Although Amy consistently denied it, saying no, it's not like that, it turns out I was right. Seeing Amy with an unfamiliar man right before my eyes, I couldn't stand being there any longer. As I instinctively started to flee from Amy, the man she was with suddenly yelled at me. "Hey, don't run away." He shouted loud enough for everyone around to hear, and even grabbed my arm to stop me. I was already at my breaking point. Finally, I lost my temper and grabbed the man's collar, yelling back at him. "You took Amy away from me, what are you even saying?" In front of the shopping center, two men were scuffling in the street. Passersby started to murmur and gather around. Then, "It's not like that, John, please listen to me," Amy said. Finally, Amy herself started to speak. But I couldn't stop the emotions I had bottled up from overflowing. The man she was with desperately tried to restrain me from lashing out. Thankfully, this prevented me from being reported to the police by a passersby. Amy calmly tried to reason with me. She wanted to talk things over properly. Amy and the man took me to a cafe. Fortunately, there were no other customers. It was a convenient setting for our complicated situation. In the awkward atmosphere, Amy quietly began to speak. "The truth is, I only have a few months to live. I'm currently staying at a hospice run by Mr. Johnson here." I was too shocked by this sudden revelation to find words. Life expectancy, hospice, Amy. It took me about 10 seconds to comprehend the situation, and all I could do was silently listen to Amy's story. Amy spoke calmly. Soon after we got married, she went for a medical checkup where a cervical cancer screening required a follow-up. I was too busy with work, and Amy felt no pain, so she never imagined it could be cancer. That's why she didn't rush to get a follow-up. Months later, when Amy finally visited the hospital again, the cancer had metastasized beyond the cervix, and the doctors couldn't do much. Amy was abruptly given her prognosis right there. Afterwards, Amy struggled a lot with her situation. I was a rising star in my career, full of promise. We had just gotten married, and soon we'd have to think about starting a family. Amy needed to be hospitalized for treatment, which would require a dedicated nurse for assistance. If she told me about her illness, and I found out about the prognosis, I would probably abandon my work to stay by her side. Amy was thinking about the life ahead, one without her presence. She strongly wanted me to focus on my career. That's why she decided not to tell me about her illness, to avoid being a hindrance. Amy resolved to remove herself from my life. She thought that by acting like a bad person and leaving me, it might actually make me more resilient and help me move on. She even thought that it might lead me to cut my ties with her completely and possibly remarry someone new. Such was Amy's heartbreaking act of deception. I was completely fooled and taken in by her act. The man with Amy was the owner of the hospice where she was staying. Mr. Johnson had always been against Amy continuing her lie and was angry that I was being deceived. That's why he yelled at me earlier. He apologized to me repeatedly. But there was one thing that Amy hadn't anticipated: that I still loved her, even now. No matter what lies Amy told, there was no way I could simply forget her. Hearing everything about Amy's journey, I found myself not angry, but instead even more deeply in love with her. Amy's lies weren't for her own sake. Rather, she had sacrificed our life together in order to secure my future, even after losing her. Knowing that Amy had been thinking of me till the end, I couldn't stop my tears. I had loved Amy sincerely, and now I realized just how much she had loved me in return. As Amy talked, she was trembling slightly. Receiving a sudden terminal illness diagnosis, going through a divorce, and then living alone in a hospice. I can't imagine how hard it must have been. I instinctively wrapped her hand in my own. And I made sure to tell her clearly. Do you remember when I proposed? I said I would always make you happy, no matter what, right? You have to remember. I said this with a smile. Almost out of breath and spilling tears, she asked me, in a soft voice, "You understand that I don't have much time left. Are you okay with that?" "Of course," I replied, and took Amy's hand. Then I pulled a necklace chain from the collar of my polo shirt. That's my wedding ring that I handed over when we separated. I couldn't help but grin at Amy's surprised voice. Yes, it was the wedding ring we both wore when we were newlyweds. Even after our divorce, I always wanted to be with Amy. That's why I kept our 2 wedding rings connected on a chain, never taking it off. I turned it into a necklace so no one would notice, and though it might seem clingy, it was my way of expressing my feelings for Amy. Gently, I removed a wedding ring from the chain. "Let's put these rings back on each other's fingers, so we never part again," I suggested. I then slid the wedding ring onto Amy's slender ring finger. Tears streaming, Amy did the same to my ring finger. It's been a long way round the block, but we finally were able to reaffirm our feelings for each other. Beside us, with a smile, Mr. Johnson from the hospice was crying, clapping his hands and saying, "I'm so glad, truly glad." Although Amy objected, I decided to take a leave of absence from work for a while. I received understanding and support from my boss, who had also lost his wife early. He agreed to take over all of my work responsibilities. With that, I returned home with Amy, who has a short time left, not to the hospice, but to our own house. We decided to spend our last remaining time together, just the 2 of us. Amy made us lunch, and we went to various places together. We visited nearby flower fields and farms, the zoo, the aquarium, and even Tokyo Skytree. The best memory was visiting the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which Amy had always wanted to see. The last few months with Amy were incredibly peaceful, becoming an unforgettable lifetime memory for me. Several months have gone by since Amy passed away. I won't say I don't feel sad or lonely, but in my heart, Amy will always be there. I will continue to live my life to the fullest, holding on to the memories of Amy in my heart, because that's the promise I made in the end.